Hey everyone, it's Rex here. I haven't done a stream in ages, so I'm going to take you through a bit the creative process of designing a character. Now I'm kind of skirting around the location that this character exists in because we haven't revealed it yet, but he's basically kind of based on some of the characters that I remember from my childhood that but well, particularly people that I maybe saw around my dad, who's a sort of farmer inventor kind of character. So these are the kind of this guy that I'm designing now is based on those. You know, he's kind of the person that you'd expect to smell slightly of paraffin and and always be covered in grease and oil. Now I always start off in the sketchbook, not necessarily like trying to draw exactly the character, although this time it went pretty well straight off. Often it's just to try and put myself in the right mindset. You know, it's kind of loosen yourself up. I often find that the first few things I draw are not really abstract enough. And then they become kind of more the kind of shapes, and they become more distorted and more interesting as I go on. So here in Photoshop, I find that it's very useful to have all of the other characters from what you're working on alongside, so you can check the style, make sure that you're keeping things consistent. And I'm just starting off here using the selection tool. It's a very sort of basic way of working really, but I really like just drawing out shapes in quite a rough way, and then using a paint tool to fill in and paint some texture in. At the start I'm working in quite simple colours. But gradually you'll be adding more texture in. In a similar technique to how Eric Carle, the children's book illustrator and creator of what's it called? Can't think what he's called. The Caterpillar book. the Very Hungry Caterpillar. That's right. Using a somewhat similar technique, I guess, in a digital way to how he works, where he would paint texture down and then cut out, pieces of textured paper and then layer those up. I guess I'm doing something similar, but in Photoshop. So basically we're just creating all the various different elements. You'll see how quite often I'll move things around quite a lot, change scale. Try not to do too much because obviously you get more like digital artifacts creeping in. I should say that this video was originally like 3.5 hours long, and I didn't think anyone would want to watch that. So this is double speed. My hands aren't jittering that much. You're hopefully, we'll get to the end a little bit quicker. I also made a stream of the character on the right, another new character for Knights and Bikes. But I'm not quite so happy with that other character. I feel that they're maybe a little bit too detailed, so I've kind of just got them open on my screen all the time, and I'm just thinking about how to tweak that character as well. But for this whole video, I'm just going to be working on this character here. As I was saying earlier, a lot of the work is really just creating bold shapes, just filling those in very quickly, and then tweaking the colours. I use the hue and saturation tool a lot to just try out different colour choices. Sometimes it kind of frees you up to make some kind of stranger choices than you would actually normally get. And then once I've put down all of these solid layers of colour, I'll start to add some more texture and then switch to a different finer brush for doing the smaller elements like stubble or eyebrows or parts like that. So yeah, it's kind of coming together. I'm referring to the sketchbook a lot. I don't like to slavishly follow it. I mean, there's a reason that I don't, that I wouldn't ever scan a sketchbook drawing in and then just trace over the top, because I think you lose some spontaneity. The original drawing in the sketchbook was just drawn freehand straight off, and I kind of want to still get that feel, even though you're actually working in a much slower medium in Photoshop, and layering up all the colour and the texture and what have you. Got a little bit of shadow coming in now. It's starting to give, although the characters are very, very two-dimensional, I like to have some little nods towards a more three-dimensional look. I think when you've got characters that are quite abstract, it does help to just have a few elements of shadow just to help them read a bit easier. So I always start with faces. I don't think there's anything that revolutionary by starting there. I think you kind of need to ground yourself and know what kind of character this is and what their expression's like, and just get a general, it's the focal point. I find I tend to start with noses. I don't know why. I've got a thing for noses, but I think it's probably because it sets a bit of a framework for the face. I'll often put the eyes in quite unusual positions. They usually be both on the same side of the face, not lined up. So the nose is kind of a good way of just saying, well, this is which way the face is pointing. So once I've figured out the face and have a very rough idea of the body shape, I'll probably start to, as I am here, start working on some of the clothing. So this guy, he's got a little woolen bobble hat. You can just see that coming in now, defining the shape, and then using the paint tool to add the colour in. It's maybe a little bit unusual for me on this particular artwork that I am actually using the fill tool. Generally, I enjoy painting the colour in, mostly because it just gives me a little bit of time to think about what I'm going to do next. I could work quicker by just quickly filling in the colour, with a single click. But there's something kind of more tactile and more engaging to actually sit there and and fill that whole area in with the paintbrush. Maybe I was just feeling the pressure with everyone watching, so I've kind of gone for a slightly quicker option this time by mostly just putting the basic colour in one go. But like I said, normally I would kind of hand paint that in one bit at a time. See a little bit of time saving again, where I've just mirrored the hair. I always feel guilty about doing things like this, but you know, I think sometimes it's well, it enables you to still keep your flow, and be quite quick with seeing how the character's coming together, and then you can finesse. You know, I can always go back and repaint the hair on one side from the other, so that it is different, if I'm feeling, you know, really guilty about it later on. So now progressing onto the torso. Now this guy, he is going to have a string vest. Not something that you see that often anymore. I kind of wonder when you know the last time that a string vest was sold. Maybe they're still available. I don't know. I certainly haven't got any. Have you got any? So we'll just bring those eyes out a little bit. You know, as you start to add more detail on the rest of the body, you sometimes can find that the face is starting to recede a little bit, and you want to make sure that remains the focal point. And the same when you're working on the body, sometimes you put a little bit too much detail, and then you need to you know, go back later on and strip some of that out, or just knock it back a little bit with extra washes of colour or texture over the top. Working a little bit on the nose here. I don't use Photoshop's layer styles that much, but sometimes it's quite useful to like here, to really get that fleshiness of the tip of his nose, and then using the hue and saturation tool to adjust the colours, and like I was saying earlier, you know, sometimes go for some tints that are not necessarily what you would initially think of, but you know, get some extra colour values in there that you weren't initially planning. So got a little bit more colour in his face now, a little bit too much, but we'll take that back. Starting to you know, blend in more with our cast of characters now. I'm always putting you know, I get carried away and paint on one layer and then add something on a little bit later on, and then realise that I've put it on the same layer, but you know, it all gets sorted out. I'm terrible at naming my layers. You know, anyone I ever work with, if they ever have to open up one of my Photoshop files, they'll find several hundred unnamed layers, which is, you know, it's a terrible habit to be in. But when I'm painting, you know, the last thing you want to do is be like working on a file structure. You know, it's not like any of the great painters were busy like filing their card indexes while they were actually painting at the same time. Using the thinner brush now to add some detail in. I'm finding for this game, this combination of the two brushes, one that's quite a soft, like area-based brush, and then the finer one, finer brush, really work well together. And just using those two brushes is basically how what gives the game its look. A little bit more shadow. I often add shadow in, but it isn't really till the end that you can really adjust them all, and make sure that the tones are all both sitting well together, but also contrasting where they need to. This woolly hat is getting a lot of love, as any woolly hat should get. I haven't really thought about what I'm going to do in terms of animation of this character, but and I have to be careful not to get too carried away on the animation, because there's quite a few characters to populate the game with. I think little elements, I definitely see with this character, even if they don't have a lot of expressive animations, I'll be able to just make them feel more alive by making the little bobble on their hat, sort of bounce around in the wind, and a little bit of a rustle in their sideburns. So anyway, this is going to be like 40 minutes of pretty much these same few procedures, repeated over and over. So there's not so much that I can really talk you through. So I'm gonna duck out now, because you've probably got other things you'd rather listen to. You can put on the Knights and Bikes playlist from Spotify, or something like that, or maybe you'll get on with your own drawing as well. But yeah, I hope you enjoy watching this character coming to life, and seeing all the mistakes I make along the way. And yeah, enjoy. Cheers.